Most people think they know what angels and demons are. Angels, those radiant, winged beings clothed in white, serve as protectors, messengers of light and love. Demons, their hideous counterparts, are agents of chaos and evil, lurking in the shadows of our imagination, tempting the righteous, and dragging the wicked into fiery torment. But what if everything we thought we knew about them was wrong? This is not just another story about good and evil. It is a journey into the ancient pages of Scripture, where meaning often hides beneath layers of translation, interpretation, and cultural transformation. This investigation doesn't begin in a church pew or a Sunday school classroom. It begins in the dusty scrolls of the Hebrew Bible, in the ancient temples of Mesopotamia, and in the minds of prophets who saw visions too terrifying, too glorious, for our modern symbols to contain. We are taught that angels are beautiful, human-like beings with wings and halos, but the Bible's earliest descriptions paint a very different picture. What if I told you that some biblical angels have 4 faces, of a lion, an ox, a human, and an eagle, and that they are covered entirely in eyes? What if the seraphim that sing before the throne of God are not gentle choirs, but fiery, serpentine entities whose very name means burning ones? And demons, where do they really come from? The word demon never appears in the Hebrew Bible in the way modern culture uses it. In fact, the most feared figure in Christian theology, Satan, begins not as a horned rebel but as a title, Ha-Satan, the accuser, a heavenly prosecutor doing God's bidding. No fire, no horns, just a role, a function. Over time, stories changed, cultures collided. What was once symbolic became literal. What was once poetic became weaponized. And somewhere in that shifting tide of human fear, faith, and imagination, angels became idols and demons became scapegoats. In this series, we will unravel the transformation of these spiritual beings, tracking their evolution from ancient Hebrew texts, through the apocalyptic literature of the Second Temple period, to the darkly imaginative writings of early Christians and medieval mystics. We will look beyond modern interpretations and dig deep into ancient languages, Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic. This is not a story of fantasy. This is a story of history, of theology, of myth, and of power, because the way we imagine angels and demons says as much about us as it does about the divine. And if you stay with me on this journey, what you find may not be what you expect, but it might just be closer to the truth. To understand the origins of angels and demons, we must first understand the celestial beings themselves. Beginning with the angels, in most modern Christian and secular depictions, angels are ethereal, gentle creatures that are sent to protect or guide humanity. But if we look deeper into the biblical accounts, we discover a radically different portrayal. Angels in the Hebrew Bible are far from the comforting, winged beings we have come to know. The earliest descriptions of angels are not of soft and serene beings descending from heaven to offer solace. Rather, they are powerful, terrifying entities that often appear as messengers of God's wrath. In the book of Genesis, when the 2 angels visit the city of Sodom, they are not clothed in robes of light or described with gentle features. Instead, these angels are described as men who are hot with anger at the sin they are about to witness. In their encounter with Lot, they are relentless and firm, showing little of the tenderness associated with later depictions of angels. The Hebrew word most commonly used for angel is malach, which means messenger. This term is used throughout the Old Testament to describe beings who are sent by God to carry out specific tasks. But these messengers are not just bearers of good news, they are often agents of destruction. When God sends the malach to Egypt to destroy the firstborn sons in the story of the Exodus, this angel is an embodiment of divine judgment. The malach does not hesitate to carry out its mission. There is no negotiation, no mercy. The destruction is complete and absolute. Even more unsettling is the encounter between the prophet Balaam and his angelic adversary in the book of Numbers. Balaam, riding his donkey, encounters a messenger of the Lord who is blocking his path. At first, Balaam does not see the angel, but his donkey does. The angel is described as holding a drawn sword, ready to strike. Balaam's eventual realization of the angel's presence underscores the intimidating and hostile nature of these divine beings. The angel does not greet him with a friendly, "Do not be afraid," as angels do in later Christian writings. Instead, The angel's first words are a scathing rebuke of Balaam for his actions. The most striking and perplexing descriptions of angels come from the visions of the prophet Ezekiel. In his vision of the chariot of God, Ezekiel describes beings that are far from the soft, comforting figures of later Christian tradition. These beings, which he calls cherubim, are strange, almost alien in their appearance. They have 4 faces, one like a man, one like a lion, one like an ox, and one like an eagle. Their bodies are covered in eyes, and they move in a way that is entirely alien to human understanding. These creatures are not simply symbols of divine protection or messengers of good tidings, they are powerful and awe-inspiring, almost beyond comprehension. In addition to the cherubim, Ezekiel also describes another order of angels known as the seraphim, who are said to burn with fire as they praise God in his heavenly court. The seraphim are not gentle singers of peace, their very name means burning ones, and they are said to have 6 wings, 2 of which cover their faces, 2 cover their feet, and 2 are used to fly. These fiery beings are so overwhelming in their presence that even Ezekiel, the prophet, is left trembling in their wake. It is important to note that these ancient depictions of angels are markedly different from the winged, human-like beings that populate Christian iconography today. The early biblical angels are often portrayed as symbols of divine power and judgment. They are not delicate or benign, they are agents of God's will, regardless of whether that will involves destruction or mercy. These beings serve as instruments of the divine plan, not as ethereal beings of light who only offer comfort and peace. One of the key reasons for this transformation in the way angels are understood lies in the evolution of Jewish theology and later Christian thought. As the Hebrew Bible progressed, angels became more abstract symbols of divine action rather than beings with physical forms. This shift from a tangible, terrifying divine presence to a more symbolic understanding of angels reflects a broader theological development, one that places less emphasis on direct, dramatic divine intervention and more on the internal, spiritual experience of faith. As Christianity began to develop its own theological framework, the role of angels evolved further. The early Christian church, while maintaining the biblical understanding of angels as messengers of God, began to adapt these beings into more relatable forms. The celestial hierarchy of angels was solidified in the writings of early Christian scholars like Dionysius the Areopagite, who outlined a complex system of angelic orders, each with specific roles. By the time of the medieval period, angels had become largely comforting figures, beings who watched over the faithful, guided the lost, and provided protection. But even in these later Christian depictions, the original fearsome nature of angels was never entirely erased. The fiery, wrathful angels of the Old Testament still lurked beneath the surface of the Christian understanding of celestial beings. The concept of an angelic hierarchy allowed for both comfort and terror to coexist, as angels could be seen as both protectors and avengers, forces of light and agents of divine wrath. It is this transformation of angels from terrifying agents of destruction to comforting guardians of peace that forms one of the central themes of our investigation into the true origins of angels and demons. The way we understand these beings today is shaped by centuries of theological evolution, cultural shifts, and artistic interpretation. The question we must ask, however, is this: what did these beings represent in their original context? What truths, hidden beneath the layers of history and tradition, might we uncover if we return to the earliest biblical texts? From divine adversary to enemy of mankind, now that we have explored the nature of angels, it's time to turn our attention to their opposites, demons. The concept of demons is intimately tied to the concept of evil. But like angels, the portrayal of demons in the Bible is not as straightforward as popular culture would suggest. In fact, the word demon is somewhat misleading when viewed through the lens of the Hebrew Bible. The term demon, as we understand it today, an evil, supernatural being actively working against humanity, does not appear in the Old Testament. Instead, the Hebrew Bible uses words like Shedem, Serum, and Ruach Ra to describe malevolent spirits or forces. But these entities are not necessarily seen as the embodiment of evil in the same way later Christian theology would frame them. In fact, the most significant figure associated with evil in the Hebrew Bible is not a demon at all, but a figure called Ha-Satan, literally, the adversary, or the accuser. This character appears most prominently in the book of Job. In this book, Satan is not yet the devil, the prince of darkness, or the arch-enemy of God that he would become in later Christian tradition. Instead, he is portrayed as a member of God's heavenly court, a divine prosecutor whose role is to test the faith and integrity of human beings. Satan's role is to accuse and challenge. He is the one who questions the righteousness of Job and seeks to expose human weakness. The transformation of Satan from a divine accuser into the enemy of humanity is a complex process that unfolds over centuries. In the early Jewish texts, Satan is not an evil being in the modern sense, but rather an agent of God's will, performing a specific function within the divine order. It is only later, particularly in the intertestamental period, the time between the Old and New Testaments, that Satan begins to take on a more malevolent role. The origins of Satan's transformation can be found in the apocalyptic literature of the Second Temple period, which was marked by growing Jewish concern about the forces of evil in the world. During this period, Jews were living under foreign domination, first under the Greeks and then the Romans, and they began to view the world as a battleground between good and evil. The imagery of angels and demons became more pronounced in Jewish thought, and Satan began to be associated with the forces of darkness opposing God's rule. One of the key texts in this development is the Book of Enoch, a pseudepigraphical work that was highly influential in Jewish and early Christian thought. In the Book of Enoch, Satan is not just a heavenly prosecutor, but a fallen angel who leads a rebellion against God. This idea of Satan as a fallen being is further developed in Christian theology, where he becomes the central figure in the cosmic struggle between good and evil. However, this idea of a fall is not explicitly found in the Hebrew Bible. It is an extrapolation based on later interpretations of certain passages, such as the famous passage in Isaiah chapter 14 verses 12 to 15, which speaks of the fall of the Babylonian king but was later applied to Satan in Christian tradition. In Isaiah, the passage is addressed to the king of Babylon, who is described as having fallen from his exalted position. The passage contains the words, "How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn." These words were originally directed at a human ruler, but early Christian writers, particularly Saint Augustine, began to see them as a reference to the fall of Satan. In this interpretation, Satan was once a high-ranking angel who rebelled against God and was cast down from heaven. This image of Satan's fall became a cornerstone of Christian demonology, but it is important to remember that it is not an explicit teaching of the Hebrew Bible. As the figure of Satan evolved, so too did the concept of demons. In the New Testament, demons are often portrayed as evil spirits that possess and torment individuals. The Greek word daimonion is used to describe these entities, which are seen as malevolent forces capable of influencing or controlling human behavior. In the Gospels, Jesus frequently encounters demons, casting them out of individuals who are possessed. The Gospels present demons as agents of chaos, disease, and suffering, and Jesus' ability to exorcise them is portrayed as a sign of his divine authority and power. The development of the concept of demons in Christian thought was influenced by a number of factors, including Jewish traditions, Greek philosophy, and the political and social climate of the time. The belief in evil spirits was common in the ancient world, and the early Christians inherited many of these beliefs. However, they also reinterpreted these beliefs in light of their understanding of Christ's victory over sin and death. Demons, in this context, are not just forces of nature or supernatural beings, but are actively opposed to the will of God. The Christian concept of demons as fallen angels is rooted in the idea that Satan, as a rebellious angel, took with him a host of other angels who followed him in his rebellion. These fallen angels became the demons that plague humanity. This narrative is most famously depicted in the apocalyptic literature of the New Testament, particularly in the book of Revelation, where Satan and his demons are cast down to the earth in the final battle between good and evil. The transformation of Satan from a divine accuser to the prince of demons and the embodiment of evil is a key development in the history of Christian theology. This process reflects broader theological shifts, as early Christians sought to reconcile their belief in an all-powerful, benevolent God with the existence of evil in the world. The rise of the devil as a figure of evil allowed for a more coherent understanding of the cosmic struggle between good and evil. a struggle that continues to shape Christian thought to this day. The idea of demons as fallen angels became entrenched in Christian doctrine. But it is important to remember that this concept is not universally accepted across all religious traditions. In fact, in many branches of Judaism, Satan is still seen as a servant of God, performing a specific role in the divine order. The modern Christian understanding of demons as autonomous, malevolent beings who act independently of God is a relatively late development, rooted in centuries of theological speculation, cultural influences, and religious evolution. As we continue our investigation into the real origins of angels and demons, we must ask ourselves, how did these ancient beings evolve into the figures we know today? And what do these transformations tell us about the nature of evil and our understanding of good and evil in the world? Angels as guardians, demons as tempters. As we venture further into the evolution of angels and demons, it is essential to look at the way these celestial and infernal beings were shaped by the cultural, theological, and political contexts of early Christianity. The transformation of angels and demons did not occur in isolation, rather, it was deeply intertwined with the theological debates, social changes, and encounters with other belief systems during the formative centuries of Christianity. The early Christian church, emerging in a world full of diverse spiritual beliefs, inherited many ideas from its Jewish roots, but also encountered and absorbed influences from the surrounding Greco-Roman world. One of the key influences on early Christian thought was the idea of dualism, particularly the dualism found in Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion. Zoroastrianism posited a cosmic struggle between the forces of good, led by the god Ahura Mazda, and the forces of evil, led by the evil spirit Angra Mainyu, Ahriman. This stark division between light and darkness, good and evil, was a concept that resonated with the early Christian worldview. In the New Testament, particularly in the Gospels, angels are depicted as messengers of God who carry out divine commands, often in dramatic, supernatural ways. For instance, in the Gospel of Luke, the angel Gabriel announces the birth of John the Baptist and later, the birth of Jesus to Mary. This image of angels as divine messengers of good news became a central aspect of Christian theology. Gabriel, in particular, came to be associated with the announcement of salvation, a symbol of divine intervention and grace. However, the most significant development in the Christian concept of angels came with the rise of angelology, the study of angels. By the time of the early church fathers, such as Augustine of Hippo, angels had become symbols not just of divine messengers, but of spiritual guardians. The belief that angels protected and guided individuals was firmly entrenched in Christian thought. The idea that every Christian had a guardian angel became widely accepted, rooted in passages such as Matthew chapter 18 verse 10, where Jesus speaks of the angels of children always seeing the face of my Father who is in heaven. This shift in understanding angels as guardians of the faithful was also reflected in the popular Christian practice of invoking angels for protection and aid in times of danger or uncertainty. In this way, angels moved from their terrifying, otherworldly roles as messengers of judgment to become symbols of comfort, reassurance, and divine protection. But alongside the rise of angelic benevolence, demons also became more defined in Christian thought, with the emergence of Christianity as a dominant religion in the Roman Empire. The Christian concept of demons evolved as well. Early Christian theologians began to elaborate on the nature of demons as fallen angels, led by Satan in his rebellion against God. This transformation of demons from neutral or ambiguous spirits in earlier Jewish traditions to malevolent beings directly opposed to God's will became a key element of Christian eschatology, the study of the end times. The most influential Christian text on demons and their role in the cosmic battle between good and evil is the Book of Revelation, which vividly describes the final battle between the forces of light and darkness. In Revelation chapter 12 verse 7-9, a war breaks out in heaven between the archangels and the forces of Satan. The archangel Michael leads the heavenly army against Satan and his angels, who are cast down to earth. This passage, along with others in the New Testament, established the idea of a final cosmic confrontation in which Satan and his demons will be defeated, and God's kingdom will be fully established. This apocalyptic vision of the final battle between angels and demons had a profound impact on Christian thought and influenced the way demons were understood. Demons were no longer just agents of chaos or disease, they were viewed as active participants in the cosmic struggle between good and evil. Agents of temptation and corruption, striving to lead humanity away from God and toward destruction. This narrative of temptation became central to the Christian understanding of sin. Demons, led by Satan, were seen as tempters, seeking to lure humans into sin and separate them from God. One of the most significant theological developments in this regard was the concept of original sin, which became a cornerstone of Christian doctrine. According to this doctrine, all humans inherit the sinful nature of Adam and Eve, who fell from grace in the Garden of Eden after succumbing to the temptation of the serpent, an embodiment of Satan. In this narrative, the serpent is not just a symbol of evil, but an active agent of Satan's influence, seeking to corrupt humanity and turn them away from God's commandments. The temptation of Eve by the serpent in Genesis chapter 3 is thus reinterpreted as the work of Satan and his demonic forces. This understanding of demons as tempters and corrupters of humanity was further solidified during the Middle Ages, a period marked by intense religious and social upheaval. During this time, the fear of demons and witchcraft reached a fever pitch, and the Church developed a sophisticated system of exorcism to combat demonic possession and influence. The belief in demons as malevolent beings capable of possessing individuals and leading them to sin became widespread, and this belief was used to justify the persecution of alleged witches and heretics. The image of demons as active agents of evil continued to evolve in the medieval and Renaissance periods. In the art and literature of the time, demons were often depicted as grotesque, monstrous beings with horns, claws, and twisted faces. These depictions reinforced the idea of demons as tangible, terrifying entities that threatened the souls of the faithful. The belief in demonic possession and the power of exorcism became deeply ingrained in Christian culture, and the struggle between angels and demons was seen as a daily reality, played out in the lives of ordinary Christians. By the time of the Enlightenment and the rise of rationalism in the 18th century, the belief in demons began to wane, as scientific and secular explanations for many of the phenomena once attributed to demonic influence took hold. However, even in modern times, the idea of angels and demons persists in popular culture, where they continue to serve as symbols of good and evil, light and darkness, protection and temptation. In the end, the evolution of angels and demons in Christian thought reflects a broader theological struggle to understand the nature of good and evil, the power of divine grace, and the role of humanity in the cosmic drama of salvation and damnation. The images of angels and demons have evolved over centuries, shaped by cultural influences, theological debates, and the human desire to understand the forces that govern our lives. But beneath all the layers of tradition, one thing remains clear: the battle between light and darkness, good and evil, continues to be a central theme of the Christian faith, and the figures of angels and demons stand as symbols of this eternal struggle. Angels and demons in the age of Reformation, science, and modernity. As the Christian world entered the Renaissance and the Reformation, the cultural and theological landscape was radically reshaped. These periods of immense social, political, and intellectual upheaval had profound implications for the understanding of angels and demons. The rise of humanism, the challenge to the authority of the Catholic Church, and the birth of modern science all contributed to the way these supernatural beings were perceived, both within the Church and in broader society. The Protestant Reformation, which began in the early 16th century with Martin Luther's 95 Theses, challenged the Catholic Church's teachings and practices. One of the core issues of the Reformation was the question of the intercession of saints and angels. Protestants rejected the Catholic practice of praying to angels and saints for help, seeing it as an improper form of veneration. Instead, they emphasized a direct relationship between the believer and God, arguing that Jesus Christ alone was the mediator between humanity and God. This shift in focus led to a re-evaluation of the role of angels in the lives of Christians. The Protestant reformers viewed angels more as messengers of God rather than active participants in the life of the believer. The belief in personal guardian angels, so prevalent in Catholicism, was downplayed or rejected in many Protestant traditions. The emphasis was placed more on the authority of Scripture and the work of the Holy Spirit in guiding believers, rather than the intervention of angels. In this way, the Reformation contributed to a shift in the Christian understanding of angels from powerful intermediaries to more distant, less involved beings. At the same time, the Reformation also saw a growing interest in the supernatural, particularly in the realm of exorcism and the battle against demonic forces. With the decline of the Catholic Church's central authority, the Protestant movements developed their own methods for dealing with demonic possession and influence. In some Protestant circles, the fear of demonic attack became more pronounced, as demons were seen as agents of the papacy or agents of the Antichrist, working to deceive and lead people away from the true faith. This period saw the rise of witch hunts and trials, as accusations of witchcraft and demonic possession became more widespread. In contrast to the Protestant Reformation, the Catholic Church continued to maintain a strong belief in the active role of angels and demons in the lives of the faithful. The Counter-Reformation, the Catholic response to Protestantism, sought to reaffirm the traditional Catholic teachings, including the veneration of angels, the belief in guardian angels, archangels, and the power of angels to intervene in human affairs remained central to Catholic doctrine. The belief in angels and demons was not only shaped by religious movements but also by the intellectual currents of the time. The Renaissance, with its revival of classical learning, fostered a renewed interest in ancient texts, including those that dealt with angels and demons. The works of philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, as well as mystical and esoteric traditions such as Gnosticism and Kabbalah, began to influence the Christian understanding of the supernatural. This period saw a fascination with occult knowledge and the belief in spiritual realms beyond the material world. Angels and demons became central figures in the mystical and occult traditions that flourished during this time. However, as the Enlightenment swept across Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries, a new worldview emerged that was grounded in reason, science, and empirical observation. The rise of rationalism and the scientific method led to a decline in belief in supernatural forces, including angels and demons. Thinkers like René Descartes, Isaac Newton, and John Locke championed a worldview that saw the universe as governed by natural laws rather than divine intervention. The rise of modern science provided alternative explanations for phenomena once attributed to demonic influence, such as mental illness, disease, and natural disasters. This shift in intellectual thought had a profound impact on religious belief. As scientific discoveries expanded, the belief in angels and demons began to wane, particularly in more secularized societies. The growing emphasis on individual reason and empirical evidence made the supernatural seem increasingly irrelevant, and many people began to question the existence of angels and demons altogether. The once popular belief in demonic possession, for example, was increasingly seen as a manifestation of psychological disorders, such as epilepsy or schizophrenia, rather than as the result of supernatural forces. However, the Enlightenment's emphasis on reason and science did not completely erase the belief in angels and demons. Even as belief in supernatural forces declined in some circles, popular culture continued to be fascinated with these beings. The figure of the demon, in particular, became a central character in literature, art, and later in film. Stories of exorcism, possession, and spiritual warfare became popular themes in the works of writers like John Milton, whose Paradise Lost, 1667, famously depicts the rebellion of Satan and the fall of angels. In the modern era, films like The Exorcist and books like The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis continued to keep the battle between good and evil alive in the public imagination. At the same time, belief in angels continued to thrive, albeit in a more personalized and less institutionalized form. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the concept of the guardian angel experienced a resurgence, particularly in the context of spiritualism and New Age movements. Many people began to embrace the idea that angels were spiritual guides who could offer comfort, protection, and guidance in times of need. This belief in angels as personal, benevolent beings was especially popularized in the 20th century through books, films, and even television shows. The modern concept of angels, as beings that help guide, protect, and inspire individuals, reflects a shift away from the traditional theological roles that angels once played. In contemporary spiritual thought, angels are often seen as symbols of hope and spiritual enlightenment, providing a comforting presence in times of personal crisis or spiritual longing. Similarly, demons, while still depicted as malevolent forces in popular culture, are often portrayed as temptations or personal struggles rather than as literal external entities. In conclusion, the Reformation, the rise of science, and the development of modern philosophical thought all contributed to the shifting understanding of angels and demons in Western culture. While the belief in these supernatural beings may have waned in intellectual circles, they continue to occupy a significant place in the popular imagination, particularly in literature, film, and spiritual practice. The battle between good and evil, as symbolized by angels and demons, remains a central theme in human consciousness, reflecting our ongoing search for meaning, morality, and transcendence in a complex and often uncertain world. As the 20th and 21st centuries have unfolded, the imagery and concepts of angels and demons have continued to evolve, largely shaped by the rise of mass media, popular culture, and the increasing focus on individualism and personal spirituality. While the influence of traditional religious institutions may have waned in many parts of the world, the appeal of these supernatural beings persists in ways that are more intertwined with entertainment, literature, film, and even self-help and New Age spiritualism. The figure of the angel, once purely a symbol of divine intervention, has been reimagined as a guide or protector in a world that seems increasingly disconnected from organized religion. Conversely, the demonic forces have been reinterpreted as psychological struggles or moral tests, still reflecting a battle between good and evil, but often in more personal or societal terms. Angels in popular culture, guardians, guides, and symbols of hope. In the 20th century, angels underwent a transformation from strictly religious figures into symbols of hope, protection, and spiritual guidance. This shift was particularly notable in the rise of popular culture, where angels began to appear in films, television shows, and literature as beings who were not only messengers of God but also personal guides to individuals navigating life's challenges. One of the most famous modern representations of angels is the 1998 film City of Angels, where the Archangel Gabriel falls in love with a human woman. This film explores themes of love, sacrifice, and the yearning for something more in life, recontextualizing the angel as not only a divine being but also as a figure embodying human desires and emotions. The popularity of such representations of angels highlights a larger trend in which celestial beings are depicted as protectors and guides for ordinary people, helping them navigate the difficulties of modern life. In this sense, angels have evolved from figures that merely perform God's will to beings that act as companions to individuals in their spiritual journeys. TV shows like Touched by an Angel, 1994 to 2003, exemplify this transformation, portraying angels who help people through life's struggles by offering comfort, support, and wisdom. The central premise of Touched by an Angel is that angels intervene in the lives of humans, nudging them toward faith, healing, and personal growth. The rise of New Age spirituality has further amplified the modern interpretation of angels as beings who are not just part of a specific religious tradition but as universal symbols of healing, guidance, and personal empowerment. Books like The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield, which became a global sensation in the 1990s, depict angels and other spiritual beings as part of a larger cosmic order that can be accessed by anyone seeking higher consciousness or spiritual enlightenment. This trend reflects a broader shift in Western spirituality away from institutionalized religion and towards more personal, individualized beliefs about the metaphysical realm. In this framework, angels are not necessarily tied to a particular religious tradition, but are seen as benevolent guides and helpers who assist individuals in their quest for self-actualization and spiritual growth. The image of the angel as a personal spiritual guide is not limited to New Age circles. Even within traditional Christian communities, the belief in angels as protectors and comforters persists. Many Christians continue to believe in guardian angels, seeing them as divine protectors who watch over individuals, especially children, and guide them through difficult times. This belief is reinforced through prayers, rituals, and personal anecdotes, as people share stories of angelic interventions in times of need. The modern image of the angel, while less focused on grand theological battles or divine missions, still remains a symbol of divine care and presence in everyday life. Demons in modern times, temptation, inner struggle, and moral dilemmas, on the other side of the cosmic battle between light and darkness. The portrayal of demons has also undergone significant changes. While demons were once seen primarily as external agents of evil, intent on leading humanity astray, their portrayal in modern culture often reflects more personal or psychological struggles. In literature, film, and other media, demons are frequently depicted as manifestations of inner turmoil, personal flaws, or societal pressures, rather than as literal, malevolent beings. This shift mirrors the growing influence of psychology, psychiatry, and secular thought, which began to frame moral and psychological issues as personal struggles rather than cosmic battles between good and evil. One of the most famous examples of this shift is William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist, 1971. Both a best-selling novel and a landmark film in the horror genre. The story of a young girl possessed by a demon, and the ensuing battle for her soul, taps into deep cultural fears about the nature of evil, both external and internal. The film became a massive cultural phenomenon and is often regarded as one of the most frightening films ever made. However, the movie also portrays the idea of possession not as something distant and otherworldly but as something that affects the everyday lives of ordinary people. It is the battle of the mind, of a family struggling to save their daughter, and of a priest grappling with his own faith and doubt. Demons in the modern era often embody more psychological than theological connotations. For example, in movies such as Rosemary's Baby, 1968, and The Omen, 1976, the concept of demonic influence is depicted not just as supernatural malevolence but as a symbol of the societal pressures, fears, and control mechanisms that individuals experience in their personal lives. These films explore how individuals become ensnared by external forces, whether these forces are oppressive social structures or hidden, malevolent powers that seem beyond their control. In a similar vein, the concept of demonic temptation has also evolved in literature, with demons now often representing personal flaws such as greed, lust, or pride, rather than literal dark forces. Moreover, the idea of demonic possession has become intertwined with psychological conditions in the modern world. Mental illnesses such as schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, and other psychiatric conditions were once viewed through the lens of religious beliefs, often being interpreted as demonic possession. Today, these conditions are understood from a medical and psychological perspective, though the cultural representations of possession and exorcism in the media continue to blend supernatural and psychological explanations. The role of angels and demons in the 21st century, a continuing battle of good and evil. In contemporary times, the struggle between angels and demons continues to serve as a symbolic narrative in many aspects of life. Especially in the entertainment industry, the moral dichotomy between good and evil remains a central theme in movies, TV shows, literature, and video games. Popular franchises such as Supernatural, 2005 to 2020, Constantine, 2005, and Lucifer, 2016 to 2021, continue to explore the relationship between angels and demons, often focusing on the blurred lines between the two and the personal choices individuals must make in navigating the moral landscape. The modern portrayal of angels and demons in pop culture, while still retaining some elements of traditional religious beliefs, has been deeply influenced by the secularization and individualism that characterizes much of the 21st century. Angels, once seen as messengers of God, are now often portrayed as personal, spiritual figures who offer protection and guidance to individuals in need. Demons, meanwhile, have evolved from external beings of malevolence to representations of inner psychological struggles, temptations, and moral dilemmas. This ongoing evolution of angels and demons is a reflection of broader societal changes. In an age where organized religion is no longer the central authority it once was, the figures of angels and demons have found new life in the realm of personal spirituality and cultural imagination. The battle between good and evil, light and darkness, continues to captivate the human imagination, even as the nature of these forces becomes more subjective, fluid, and tied to the internal struggles of individuals. Ultimately, The enduring popularity of angels and demons in modern culture speaks to the timeless human need to understand the forces that shape our lives and our world. Whether viewed through the lens of religion, psychology, or entertainment, these supernatural beings remain powerful symbols of the ongoing struggle between good and evil, offering insight into our moral, spiritual, and existential quests. As we stand at the crossroads of the 21st century, the ancient struggle between angels and demons continues to hold a powerful grip on human imagination, belief, and culture. The story of angels and demons, as it has evolved through religious, philosophical, and cultural movements, speaks to our deepest fears, desires, and moral aspirations. But what is it that this ancient battle can teach us today? Throughout history, angels and demons have served not only as metaphysical beings but as symbols, reflecting the moral and spiritual challenges that define our human experience. In religious contexts, angels have been seen as messengers of divine will, agents of protection, and symbols of purity and grace. Demons, on the other hand, have represented temptation, the struggle for power, and the dark aspects of human nature. Their presence in our stories, our religions, and our daily lives reminds us that good and evil, light and darkness, are not abstract concepts but forces that shape our personal and collective destinies. In the Bible, the creation of angels and demons is often seen as part of God's grand design, where free will is central to the narrative of human existence. The story of Lucifer's fall from grace serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of pride, disobedience, and the desire for power. Lucifer, the once most beloved of angels, sought to overthrow God and was cast into hell. This act of rebellion serves as a reminder that even the most exalted beings can fall when they stray from the path of righteousness. Yet, the presence of angels throughout the Bible, from the cherubim who guard the Garden of Eden to the archangels who communicate God's messages to humanity, reveals the enduring theme of divine protection and guidance. Angels are not just figures of myth, they are representations of hope, purity, and the divine intervention that humans seek in times of crisis. They remind us that, no matter how dark the world becomes, there is always a higher power looking over us, guiding our way. The Reformation and the Enlightenment brought radical changes to these traditional views. As the Protestant Reformation dismantled the centralized power of the Catholic Church, angels and demons were reinterpreted. Protestant reformers reduced the role of angels, placing greater emphasis on direct communication with God through Scripture rather than through intermediaries. The demonic forces, once seen as literal agents of evil, were re-examined, and many theologians began to understand them as metaphors for the internal struggle between good and evil within each person. The rise of modern science, too, began to challenge traditional understandings of the supernatural, with intellectuals like Isaac Newton and René Descartes shifting focus to natural laws rather than divine or demonic intervention. However, the decline of traditional religious authority did not spell the end for angels and demons. On the contrary, they found new life in popular culture and spirituality. With the advent of mass media, television, and film, angels were depicted less as messengers of God and more as figures of personal guidance and comfort. The modern angel is not merely a celestial being with divine authority, but a spiritual companion who helps individuals navigate the challenges of modern life. Movies like The Heavenly Kid, 1982, and City of Angels, 1998, portrayed angels as beings who not only intervened in human affairs but also helped individuals understand their purpose and potential. This transformation reflects a shift in society's attitude toward spirituality, one that values personal empowerment and individual connection to the divine over institutionalized religious practice. Similarly, the figure of the demon has undergone a transformation. Once a symbol of external malevolent forces, demons in modern media have become metaphors for inner struggles and psychological conflicts. In films like The Exorcist, 1973, and The Omen, 1976, demons are not just agents of evil but representations of fear, trauma, and the darker aspects of human psychology. They embody the moral dilemmas, temptations, and destructive tendencies that lie within all of us. This shift has deepened our understanding of the nature of evil, not as something external that we battle, but as something internal that we must confront and overcome. In the age of individualism, where people are often more connected to their personal beliefs than to a particular religious tradition. Angels and demons have become symbols of personal transformation. The resurgence of interest in New Age spirituality, which emphasizes personal growth and healing, has given rise to a new kind of angel, one that is not tied to a specific religion, but is a universal symbol of hope and protection. This angel represents the human longing for connection, guidance, and transcendence. Likewise, demons have come to symbolize the inner conflict between our better and worse impulses. The modern understanding of demons reflects a more nuanced view of evil, one that recognizes that our struggles with temptation, fear, and sin are part of the human condition. Yet, despite these shifts in interpretation, the fundamental narrative of good versus evil remains constant. Whether in ancient religious texts, the works of Renaissance mystics, or the movies we watch today, the story of angels and demons speaks to the same universal truths, that life is a journey fraught with choices, challenges, and consequences, that we are all capable of great good and great evil, and that, in the end, it is our decisions, our free will, that shape our destiny. As we navigate the complexities of modern life, we can take comfort in the fact that the struggle between angels and demons, light and darkness, is not a distant myth but a reality we confront every day. The lessons embedded in these ancient stories, lessons about humility, sacrifice, redemption, and the power of good over evil, are still relevant today. They remind us that, no matter how far we may stray from the path of righteousness, there is always the possibility of redemption. The angels, representing the highest ideals of goodness and compassion, beckon us to rise above our flaws, to help others, and to strive for something greater than ourselves. The demons, however, remind us of the dangers of pride, greed, and the darkness within us all. They challenge us to confront our inner demons and to make choices that align with our highest values. In conclusion, the enduring story of angels and demons is more than a religious myth or a pop culture phenomenon. It is a reflection of the human soul's constant battle between good and evil, light and darkness. It teaches us that the struggle is not just external but internal, and that our decisions, however small, have the power to shape our lives and the world around us, whether we see them as divine messengers or symbols of inner conflict. Angels and demons continue to offer us profound insights into the nature of our existence and the moral choices we face every day. As long as we continue to wrestle with questions of good and evil, we will find ourselves, like generations before us, looking to the sky and to our hearts for answers, guidance, and the hope of a better tomorrow.